6-year-old Gracelynn Vick lived with her family in Saucier, Mississippi. She was just 4 feet tall, with blonde hair, brown eyes, and a heart full of life. But on April 13, 2025, Gracelynn disappeared. Her family says she was outside playing in the front yard, but moments later, she was gone. They searched the house, walked the neighborhood, called her name, but there was no sign of her. So what happened to Gracelynn? As word spread, the community jumped into action. Search crews scoured the area, volunteers combed through woods, boats entered the water. And then, just before 6 p.m., a heartbreaking discovery. Gracelynn Vick was found dead. I'm Kennedi Walker, and I'll walk you through the details. In this story, we're going to walk through what happened that day, how a 6-year-old vanished in broad daylight and was found just hours later on her family's property. What happened to 6-year-old Gracelynn Vick? It's a mystery that's left a Mississippi town shaken and a family shattered. Gracelynn disappeared in the middle of the day. The sun was still out. Her family says they were home when she stepped outside to play in the front yard. Moments later, she was gone. Now, that same family is preparing to bury their baby girl. Gracelynn is remembered as smart, sweet, and full of life. Her aunt told the Sun-Herald that Gracelynn's first love was animals. She grew up on a farm, spending her days caring for chickens, goats, and turkeys. She loved it so much, her family named the land in her honor, Gracelynn Heritage Farms. But now, that same farm, the place where she laughed, played, and grew up, sits quiet. Gracelynn will never chase the chickens and turkeys again, never feed the animals, never grow up on the land that now carries her name. The young girl had only been missing for 6 hours when her body was found. The Harrison County Sheriff's Office launched an immediate and wide-scale search. Drones flew overhead, helicopters scanned the fields, volunteers and deputies searched on foot and by boat. And then, just before 6 p.m., a heartbreaking discovery. Gracelynn's body was found on or near the family's own property, close to a swing set and livestock pens. The area was quickly roped off. The sheriff said no one has been arrested, and it's still too early to say whether foul play was involved. But his words have not stopped speculation. A Facebook page titled Justice for Gracelynn Vick was created, filled with comments, theories, and calls for answers. Gracelynn's death comes just over a year after another devastating blow to the family. In March of 2024, her sister Victoria was killed in a car crash. She was only 13 years old. Like Gracelynn, Victoria was remembered for her love of animals. Their aunt, Jackie Polk, told the Sun-Herald that Gracelynn was still broken over her sister's death. And in 2021, just 3 years earlier, Gracelynn's older brother, Larry, passed away at the age of 17 from a medical condition. 3 children gone. One to illness, one to a crash, and now one under circumstances that remain a mystery. Gracelynn was only 6. Her cause of death hasn't been publicly confirmed, and right now there are more questions than answers. Was this a tragic accident, or is something more sinister at play? And joining me to talk more about this is legal expert Phil Waters, a retired Houston homicide detective. Phil, thank you so much for joining me today. Let's just dive right in. How does law enforcement determine whether foul play is involved in a case like this?
Well, good to be with you, Kennedy. Any time there's a scene like this, I'm going to categorize this as a homicide scene. They don't know in what direction it's going as of yet. So the sheriff's department there, they're the ones responsible for the investigation. And when homicide detectives show up, I did this for 23 years in Houston, is you let the evidence lead you where you need to be. You let the scene talk to you. And as that starts to unfold in front of the detectives, it will give them a better idea about what happened to this little 6-year-old little girl.
Well, yeah, walk us through what usually happens. What steps are typically taken in the first 24 hours of a child's disappearance?
Well, in a child's disappearance, the first thing is to all hands on deck and start getting people out to start looking for that child. And in this particular case, of course, the age of this one it's not going to be conducive to a runaway type situation. So this is going to be everybody out searching and hoping to make a rescue, or find that person, find that child alive, and not turn it into a recovery. And this unfortunately uh, turned into that recovery effort.
What kind of evidence is crucial early on?
Well, you've got to look at the area, the environment in which the disappearance occurred. And so that's going to be resolved by speaking with witnesses, talking to the family members, talking to the person that reported the child missing. Where was the child? When did you last see the child? And in this particular case, they're talking about she had gone out into the front yard to play. Now, I don't know what uh, the environment there is, or what the layout of that particular neighborhood may be. It may be a rural community where there's not a lot of space between residents of that community, so you've got a lot of open land. I don't know that it may be open fields, it may be a forested area, that kind of a thing. So you've got to evaluate the situation, what is the atmosphere, the environment in which it took place, and then try to determine which direction the child may have gone. Are there any video cameras in the area that may have picked up something? So, again, you want to try to bring any kind of resource that may give you an idea about when the child left, how the child left, and where they may have been headed.
Hypothetically, if we're dealing with, a staged incident where a potential body happened to be, moved, hypothetically, what are the signs that law enforcement looks for in possible staged accidents?
Well, I don't usually do hypotheticals, but I will talk in general about your question. So, uh, there's, again, you have to let evidence lead you where you need to be. So once those detectives get there, they're going to start looking at the scene there at the house, the place of the disappearance, and does it comport with what they're being told by the witnesses? So that stuff has to fall in place. If they find something that doesn't look to be fitting the story, then of course there's got to be more questions, and you're going to be talking to several witnesses. So you're going to keep them separated. The you want to hear the same story about what happened here in the disappearance. And when I say the same story, I'm talking about, you want to have consistent factors. They're not going to tell the exact same story, or they shouldn't, but you want to make sure that the circumstances are agreeing with one another. If you get a witness that tells a completely different set of circumstances, then, in homicide, we might call that a clue. So it's going to, you've got to take these things methodically. You have to enter them open-minded. You have to be open-minded. Every homicide scene, every missing person scene, you have to be open-minded as a detective, because, again, you want the evidence to lead you where you need to be.
Now, there's been a lot of chatter online. The little girl's body was found a few days ago on Sunday. How long does law enforcement typically hold off before making an arrest in a case like this?
Well, we don't know that there's a reason to make an arrest at this point. They've been I'm a little surprised that they've been kind of close to the vest here about what kind of circumstances under which they found the body. And I've read where they're performing an autopsy, of course, and that will get them. In fact, I think the sheriff even said that they're not sure that this is actually a moment of foul play. So, again, you don't want to release too much. You want to keep most of those details within the investigation, because you don't want to disrupt the integrity of it. If it turns out to be something more nefarious than just she walked away playing and got caught up in something in the course of what she was doing. So we don't, again, I haven't seen any details about where they found her body, except that it wasn't very far from her home. So under what circumstances? Was it found in a pond? Was it found in a wooded area? I mean, because it's going to kind of depend on where it was found. And then, of course, the main factor here is what caused her death. And so they've got to determine the cause of death and then look at the evidence which will later lead them to making a ruling on the manner of death.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of speculation online. People just wondering, how exactly this happened. With all of the experience that you have, is it usually typical that a or a child goes missing for several hours? She went missing for 6 hours, and then they ended up finding her body so close to the home, and it took 6 hours. If she was, if she really did die that close to the house, can you explain that?
Well, I don't know that you can call anything like this. There's a typical set of elements that occurs because each case is unique. And again, not knowing what the environment is around that, or the topography around that home, that area, it may be that she was in, and she's a little, she's a little girl, 6 years old. So you're not. It's sometimes that can turn into looking for a needle in a haystack kind of situation. So I'm not. It'll be interesting as the details come out. I know people speculate; they immediately go to the conspiracy theories on on incidents like this, but I don't. I mean, I sit back and I want to wait. I want to hear the details and see where the evidence leads the authorities in the recovery of her body and the circumstances surrounding her death.
If the autopsy reveals no clear cause, how does that impact a potential, sorry about that, criminal investigation?
Well, if they ended up, just to address your question, if for some reason the medical examiner ruled the cause of death was undetermined, wow, that could be throw a question into whether or not there's going to be a criminal investigation conducted. It's all going to come down to the manner of death, and if the ME ruled that death a undetermined as well, the manner of death, then it's not that they couldn't investigate further, but it's going to kind of leave them and remember, rulings from medical examiners, that's a medical legal ruling. It is not, has nothing to do with legalities in terms of the law, criminal law. So that would be very strange, I would think, and it's possible that they could rule the death a homicide, but it may be a non-criminal homicide. They can rule it accidental. They could rule it natural causes. They could rule it suicide. So those are the parameters with which they're having to look at to determine what that ruling is going to be. And then, of course, the actual autopsy is going to give them a better idea about how to rule the manner of death when they determine the cause.
Well, can a case move forward without a confirmed cause of death?
Oh, sure. There's not nothing's going to be affected in terms of the investigation. So the investigation has begun. It started out as a missing persons investigation. Now it's turned into a homicide investigation, and they've just got to determine again what are the circumstances under which this little girl dies. So that won't stop the investigation. The investigation will move forward, and they will bring it to a conclusion of some kind.
Does the law treat deaths on private property differently than public property?
No, no. If you have a death that looks, and in this case, it's going to be what I would categorize as a suspicious death, at least initially, because they don't know what the circumstances were and so forth. But in terms of whether it's on private property, it's in public, it makes no difference. The investigation is going to be driven, always a journey for the truth.
Well, there's a social media page, it's a Facebook page called Justice for Gracelynn. And a lot of people are commenting in it, posting in it, hoping to find answers. How do social media moments like Justice for Gracelynn impact investigations, if at all?
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of people that are going to get upset with me for this answer, but my experience has been that those types of things foster the conspiracy theories. They foster the people that do nothing but look for these types of websites so that they can start entering stuff into these things, these keyboard warriors that sit here and want to put what they think happened because they've watched a bunch of true crime shows. So I don't know that they, in my experience now, I've not seen anything in regards to the specifics of the question you're asking that has benefited an investigation. And in most cases, it tends to diminish it.
Well, let's talk about the scene. What kind of forensic evidence will be collected from a scene like this?
Will it depend on what they find, of course. They're good the autopsy because right now, at least the biggest. I don't want to sound this crude, but the biggest piece of evidence here is her body. And so when they do the autopsy, they're going to check in the usual places for DNA. They're going to do a SARS kit on her. They're going to do a rape kit on her to see if she was sexually assaulted. So all of that type of evidence gathering at the autopsy is going to be critical in this particular case. Now, if they find things at it'll depend on how she was found. Was she clothed? Was she not? So it's going to be dependent on how they find it. And of course, they're going to get a crime scene unit there to process the scene. They will be collecting any evidence that may appear to be relevant to the scene of the death. They're going to be also collecting evidence at the residence where she disappeared from. So it'll be a full scope of evidence gathering. And depending on where that gathering of evidence leads them to, it will determine how much evidence they're able to collect.
Can you explain how investigators rule out an accidental death versus a homicide?
Well, it's kind of one of those when you get to the scene and you take your first look at it, and again, if you can determine what caused the death. I know I've had uh, deaths where I have made a suspicious suspicious death scene, and one that comes to mind is an adult female who was laying in a grassy, very nice esplanade in a neighborhood, and she was dead. It looked like she was asleep. And when you look at her, you see that she's got a lot of scars on her, and it would appear, and there are no visible signs of trauma. So then the determination is, and it's going to come from the autopsy, because there's no evidence at that particular scene that would indicate that she died there. So now the presumption is that she died somewhere else and someone transported her body here. So when you see those types of things, those questions are going to lead those to, and in this particular case, they see the body, they see the scene where the recovery of the body is, and whatever they see there is going to lead them in the direction they need to go. In that particular case I'm telling you about, it turned out that it was a drug overdose, and that came out of the autopsy, of course. But then these other things that we were seeing were scars and that kind of thing, and I think there was some very slight bruising, but that was probably occurred when she was moved. So these things, you kind of get a first blush when you make that scene of where it may be leading to, but due diligence here in this investigation, any investigation, is going to lead you again to the truth about what happened.
What role, if any, does Child Protective Services play in these types of investigations?
In this particular case of missing child, again, it's going to be a determination of how the death occurred, why she's where she is. And now there will be the detectives. If this were my case, I would be looking into contacting Child Protective Services and saying, have we had any complaints? Have we had any investigations here that we might need to take a look at to see if there's been anything that would cause us to think this is something other than the possibility of an accidental death. So, yeah, I don't know that they would be. Of course, it'll depend on what they find. I mean, if they find something that would indicate that we need to get CPS out there to do their thing, I don't know if there's any. I know they've had a couple of tragedies in this family with other children, and I don't know if there are any other children left in the home. So that would be something, of course, that would be determined by the detectives.
Right. And we're still waiting on that autopsy, waiting to find out what they find. But if the death is ruled accidental, what comes next legally?
Well, in terms of there'll be no criminal charges filed. There's nothing to indicate that a crime occurred if it's ruled as an accident. And it will be closed out. And that, I know in Houston, we would close something like that out as, closed by investigation. It's not going to result in any kind of a criminal charge.
Could the parents be legally required to take polygraph tests?
No, nobody's ever legally required to take a polygraph. And in this particular case, unless they find something that is a little odd, the detective certainly could ask the parents or any other witnesses that they may find to take polygraph tests. And if they were willing to do that, then of course you do that. And of course, polygraph tests. I've never been a big fan of polygraph tests. I've used them only to put pressure on people because they're not. You can't use them in court, and so they're just kind of a further investigative tool.
Great. Well, this is something that we will for sure be following here at Law and Crime. Phil Waters, thank you so much for joining us today.
Great to be with you, Kennedy. Thank you.
There will be a candlelit prayer service in memory of Gracelynn Vick on Tuesday, April 22nd. For Law and Crime News, I'm Kennedi Walker.